The failed King County Regional Homelessness Authority apparently hasn't failed enough, although I would argue in 5 short years, they have proven that the homeless bureaucracy is really responsible for the homeless crisis, but they haven't failed quite enough. And so the city of Seattle and King County are going to give them more money to prop themselves up. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Okay, so there's something that happens every single year in Seattle and King County, and it's called the point-in-time count. And they literally will go out there and do their best to try to count every single person that's living outdoors, every single homeless person or living in an emergency shelter, to try to get an idea as best they can, really, of how bad the crisis is. Hint, it's really bad, and hint, it's getting worse. So the King County Regional Homelessness Authority does these point-in-time counts, and here's what they found. They found that from 2024 to 2026, homelessness has spiked 10%. We now have 18,365, roughly, homeless people living on the streets of King County. That's compared to about 17,000 just 2 years ago and 13,000 4 years ago. So it was a 26% increase, and then it was a 9% increase. And now, rather than say, and that's, by the way, while the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's budget has been ballooning, and while the amount of money that Seattle and the state spends combating homelessness has increased exponentially. And what do we get for that increase? We still get a 10% increase in homelessness. Now, of course, the KCRHA is fighting for its life. So they got to spin these numbers in some way. And so what do they say? Well, the rate of increase has slowed. It was a 26% increase between 2022 and 2024, but then it dropped to just 10%, suggesting some stabilization. It's like, okay, you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see the number go down. Is that really asking too much? Billions of dollars, billions of taxpayer dollars. Is it really asking too much to want to see a year where there's actually fewer homeless people on the streets than there was the year before? I mean, we talked about at one point the state of Washington under former Governor Jay Inslee. They were spending almost $1 million per person to remove them from encampments along state highways. And then they just never track them from there, right? It's like, oh, we did this. It's just they never do anything. It's absolutely outrageous. Now, their own data, because they'll go out, they'll count people, and then they'll try to talk to people about what is the issue here, right? Their own data proves what we've been saying all along, and what sane people know, is that this isn't a housing issue. This is an issue with people who have serious underlying problems that need to be addressed, that are stopping them in some way from having a roof over their head, from being able to afford an apartment or buy a house. So what does the KCRHA's own data say? So 15%, it says, are survivors of domestic violence. And I don't doubt that. I think that that's probably a reality. And given how much money we spend, we should be able to help every single one of them in an instant. And keep in mind that there can be overlap here. For instance, 27% serious mental illness. You could have serious mental illness and be a survivor of domestic violence, so if that makes sense on how the numbers work. 33% substance use disorder. Baloney. 33% baloney. I think that's probably people lying to them, but still 35%. And then 35% are chronically homeless, which just means that they've experienced homelessness, for an extended period of time, even when given shelter, fall back into homelessness. And then 5% are veterans. But I mean, it shows here that even the King County Regional Homelessness Authority recognizes that, it's not like they don't have a little thing on here that says, couldn't afford a house, what number of them. And technically, I bet you that would be like 90% that couldn't actually afford a house. I mean, hell, some people with 2 incomes can't afford a house. But that's not the reason why they're unhoused, right? It's not the reason they're unhoused. They're drug addicted, or they're mentally ill, or some combination of those things. And so when it comes to, the lie that continues to be told that this is a housing issue, right? Former Governor Jay Inslee said that's the fundamental issue. Bob Ferguson thinks that's the fundamental issue. Like every mayor we've had in Seattle thinks that's the fundamental issue. And so they've spent billions of dollars trying to build more housing, trying to lift up shelter. And here's what that looks like. So the number of emergency shelter beds over time has ballooned. I mean, back in 2020, we had like 4,000, and we have somewhere around 6,000 at the peak in 2025. And now Mayor Katie Wilson says she's trying to make that her priority, setting all these goals for tiny house shelters, although she hasn't come close to reaching those goals. But if we have, can you go back to the first graphic, Daryl, the chart? So it says that 36% of the people they counted as being homeless this past year, of the 18,000, are in shelters. So you have 64% that are out of shelters. And yet you've had, according to the other graphic I showed you, this massive increase in the availability of emergency shelter, yet we're only sheltering a third of people. To me, that also says what we know to be true, and what if you go out with Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle, it's because you go out and you tell these people that you have a shelter bed for them or you have a tiny house for them, and if they can't openly use drugs in it and keep doing all the things they're doing, they're not going to take it. I mean, Andrea has had stories where somebody gets out of a tent, they go into a tiny house village, she goes out the next day, they're back in the tent because for whatever reason, they didn't want to be in the tiny house, or they didn't want to abide by whatever rules there are at some sort of shelter. So no, you've got to deal with the drug abuse and those issues. But so 10% spike over the last 2 years. And this all comes as the King County Regional Homelessness Authority was found to have some unaccounted for money, shall we say, some money that wasn't maybe tracked very well or used. So they've at points had a negative cash balance of up to $44 million. $4.5 million was lost to administrative overspending, including interest payments that can't be recovered. I mean, there's been a whole bunch of issues. So what is Seattle and King County's solution here? This is from our friends at the Center Square. Costs mount to stabilize struggling King County Regional Homelessness Authority. So remember, Katie Wilson came out, Gurmai Zahalai. There were people calling for it to be abolished. And Gurmai and Katie said, no, we're not going to abolish it. We're going to hire a team of independent financial analysts to provide immediate oversight while they determine whether to repair or dissolve the agency. So according to Center Square, that's going to cost $1 million. So this financial failure of an agency that has also failed to reduce the number of homeless people on our streets in its 5 years of existence, it's gone up every year, they now get, because they wasted money and mistracked and misspent money, they now get another $1 million to try to stabilize the agency. While King County and Seattle decides, hey, should we just get rid of the agency? That's what we should do. We should piss away even more money while we sit here and ponder whether to get rid of it. And while people continue to die on our streets with needles in their arms, let's continue to do the thing that we know isn't working. That's government. That's government in a city run by progressives and socialists who think all of this is empathy, and they believe they track success by the amount of money spent. Success to them is how much money are we spending on this? And you can apply that to virtually any issue. Oh, we're spending this much money, we must be doing a good job. Well, they're just making their cronies and allies rich. It's absolutely outrageous. So failing agency, homelessness up, give it more money is the solution. Every time you give it more money, every time you give them more money, the outcome is worse. And that's by design. Homeless industrial complex, same thing with education. When we spend, the more we spend per pupil in Washington, what has happened? The worse educational outcomes have become. It's not a coincidence. It happens across the board. That segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that.